grits. Didn't check the date before I bought them. You can't see it, but June 5th of 21. June 5th of 21. Anyway. They're not bad, but the flavor is absolutely gone. So this morning, I have my jar here with my farina in it. And I have it in a container that keeps out moisture and bugs and mice. Because you never know when a mouse can get in your house and destroy hundreds of dollars of food. And you're like, how did a mouse get in my house? I don't have mice in my house. Well, when it gets cold, they find a way. And I usually put a label in there, and this says Farina. If you buy the name brand, it's cream of wheat. And I opened the small box, and the rest of it fit in this jar just fine. So this was a Heinz Real Mayonnaise jar, which a lot of people get nowadays. And then they just throw the jar away because they either don't want to rinse it or because it had mayonnaise in it. And I took it and used it as a nice jar that keeps out moisture. If, say, there was a flood in the area, and I did leave it behind, when I come back, this would be dry. It wouldn't be as good as, say, like, if I had glass, and if there was a fire and there was some smoke damage, the glass would protect the food and this wouldn't melt. But if there's an earthquake, glass will break. And this didn't cost me anything. So I use both glass and plastic, whatever comes available. But now when I shop, I'm aware of containers that I can seal. If there's two different kinds of containers for the same food, and this one has a plastic lid that doesn't rust, which I like. That's even a benefit because you don't have to worry about it gets rusty and pinholes and you got to throw it away. So that's another thought. And so I went ahead and added 1 packet of flavorless grits. It's supposed to be grits with bacon bits in, but even the bacon bits don't taste. And I added it to my mix. And you might say, oh, just throw them away. Why would you bother? Okay, let's say you got 6 months to a year worth of food. Okay? But there is no more food in the stores. And you think, oh, well, it'll come back in a couple weeks, a couple months. And it hasn't. In the meantime, you threw away something that would fill your belly. And then say, while you're out starving, they finally started getting food back in the store. Or, in the meantime, you're growing sprouts and you started vegetables under lights. And you think, oh, I'm not going to be doing that. I'll wait till hell freezes over and the Red Cross drops off some food. Well, the Red Cross might bring you a blanket, and they might tell you where the nearest shelter is, but when the food runs out and the line's still there and you're at the end of the line, I'd much rather eat this than stand in a line and find out there's no food left and there's a riot. And I might end up getting hurt at the very least, or shot or stabbed. The lucky ones probably get arrested, but there's not enough food to go around. They're not going to arrest people. They're going to just trace them off because they can't feed them either. So, here we go. I'll turn that down a little bit so it just stays warm. And then what I like to do some mornings is take a little cocoa and add it. If you got iodized salt, add your salt. So you're not going without your needed nutrients. And salt enhances the flavor too. Okay. Also add to it is I bought cinnamon, not knowing it was cinnamon sugar shaker. So what I do in this case, because I don't add sugar normally to my hot cereal, and I know a lot of you people can't eat it without a ½ pound of sugar on it. Better get used to not eating it with the sugar, because sugar is one of the first things that you're going to use up in your cupboard. And I prefer to keep my sugar for things that I really need it for. We grew up, you eat cream of wheat with a little bit of milk splattered on it in a bowl, and it was delicious. We had no problems with eating our cream of wheat in its natural state. I know a lot of you are going to say, I wouldn't eat that crap, but I tell you what, you have no food in your belly for a while, you'll eat it. And why buy food you wouldn't eat? Well, I don't buy food I don't eat because there isn't too much I won't eat. And what I do is when I find stuff on sale, I take that and I work together with it to make stuff that's more pleasing, but not necessarily, what I eat every day. It has to do with what's available. If all of a sudden I get a whole bag of peppers at a cheap price, and I can process them, I will. If I can't, then I'll use them up in my food so that they don't go to waste. So, I guess if I really had to, I could even cut peppers in strings and hang them. And if I had a warm, dry attic or whatever, I could make my own dried peppers. And people say, oh, yuck. Well, I'll tell you what, when you haven't had any fresh vegetables in a while, and you're eating something that's kind of bland, and you throw in a couple of dried peppers, you'll probably be saying, thank God I dried those peppers, instead of letting them get moldy and rot, and I had to throw them away. I didn't even put them in the compost for my garden, because I didn't know any better. Well, I can't say that I did, but I didn't care at the time. So, or, at the very least, you got pieces you cut off the pepper you don't eat, feed them to your chickens if you don't compost them. So, use your head. And we also add in here, say if this is my only meal for the day, I would add a little chunk of butter or a little piece of ghee for the whole mess. And that would be my meal. And I would thank God for food in my belly. And think ahead. Don't think about what you got now, and you can go and stop at McDonald's or Wendy's or Dunkin' Donuts, or go to Walmart and buy something already cooked, and you're on your way home, probably eating it before you get to the door. Think about what it would be like if you can't go to the store because there's riots, because steak is $25 for a little tiny piece for one serving. And a couple people are taking their steak home so that they can divide it up with their family. Some of them are taking it to eat before they leave the store, because they know that they can't get out the doors without it. So, you tell me, how bad do you think it's going to get? I've been laughed at a couple of times when I said there would be any food shortages, and things in the world are changing. And I said there would be flooding, and I was laughed at. And now that there's more and more floods, half the people are no longer laughing, and the other people, half, are still laughing, saying, well, they shouldn't have built their houses at sea level, or they shouldn't have built their house in a swamp. And I'll tell you, yeah, there are a few places that are low-lying and they flood, because that's where the poor people bought their property. But some places have never flooded in people's lifetime or their grandparents, and it's flooding. And they're all being put in the same barrel. Places that never flooded, ever, in your or our grandparents' lifetime. And we're still saying they should have never built in a flood zone. Well, people, wake up. Because any land can flood. As I found out in Hawaii, on an island. How would land in an island flood? Well, if it rains hard for a couple of hours nonstop. I just saw in a video a couple years ago, cars started flooding down the streets and buildings started to get destroyed. I watched it in my own neighborhood. In front of me, we didn't have any houses, so the water came down the streets and went right down into the gully and into the river. But the next block over, and in the next 2 blocks, the water came down the street, hit the T, and flooded the streets for 2 feet of water, and it gushed out the ends and down towards the river. But it did a lot of damage. So, luckily it didn't go over people's heads, but it still cost them a lot of money. So, if you think your property can't flood, if you have any runoff during a heavy rain that's a couple inches that comes through your property, fix it now, or think about it. I watched a video where a man had a barn, and it was on upper land, and he thought, oh, I'm good. It gets a little damp in the barn when it rains, but I'll fix it later. Well, later, there was 2 feet of water inside the barn, and all the hay was ruined that the water reached. And then when the building started to collapse, the dry hay on the top collapsed down into the water. And the man was just beside himself because he just spent a couple $100 on hay. So, if you see any water coming across your property or around it near your house, think of it being twice as bad than it is right now, at the very least. And do something to divert it now, not later. And if you can't divert it, you might think about having a place to build another building to safely put things that if something were to happen to your house, you wouldn't lose everything. Think ahead. Think now. Have a good time. It's day after the holiday. I know a lot of people are out shopping their brains out for Christmas gifts. I sure hope they're proper items. Bon appetit.